U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said that Washington could be forced to issue large rebates if the Supreme Court decides to strike down the reciprocal tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump on almost all of America's trading partners. The warning came after a federal appeals court ruled last month that Trump had overstepped presidential powers by imposing hefty duties. Speaking on NBC News' Meet the Press, Bessent said, "We would have to give a refund on about half the tariffs, which would be terrible for the Treasury. If the court says it, we'd have to do it." Without offering specifics, the Treasury Secretary suggested that numerous other avenues remain available to keep tariffs in place, but acknowledged they would diminish President Trump's negotiating position. Bessent, while discussing sanctions pressure on Moscow, made a pointed reference to countries that buy Russian oil, without naming any directly. India remains the largest target of U.S. tariffs tied to that issue, despite a recent thaw in relations that saw Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi publicly reaffirm their mutual appreciation and personal friendship. Bessent said, "We are in a race now between how long can the Ukrainian military hold up versus how long can the Russian economy hold up. And if the US and the EU can come in with more sanctions, more secondary tariffs on the countries that buy Russian oil, the Russian economy will be in full collapse, and that will bring President Putin to the table. We, the US, are prepared to increase pressure on Russia, but we need our partners in Europe to follow." The legal fight over Trump's tariffs has intensified. National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett told CBS News that the administration still had other legal authorities it could use if the Supreme Court rules against Trump, citing Section 232 investigations, the same tool used to impose steel and aluminum tariffs, as one such option. Last week, Trump asked the Supreme Court to quickly overturn the lower court decision that found many of his tariffs illegal. The petition followed an August 29 ruling by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, which voted 7-4 that Trump had overstepped his authority when he implemented tariffs on nearly all trading partners through an Emergency Economic Powers Act. The court said the president's move did not fall within the president's mandate, and that imposing tariffs was a core congressional power. Earlier in May, the New York-based Court of International Trade had already declared the tariffs unlawful. Filings by the Trump administration warned that delaying a ruling until June 2026 could result in a scenario in which $750 billion to $1 trillion in tariffs have already been collected, and unwinding them could cause significant disruption. Solicitor General John Sauer wrote in Wednesday night's filing, "The stakes in this case could not be higher." As of August 24, U.S. businesses have paid over $210 billion to cover tariffs that courts have since deemed illegal. If the Supreme Court upholds those rulings, the Treasury may have to give back vast sums of tariff revenue already collected, according to multiple media reports. Trump had invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act in April to impose the sweeping levies, declaring a national emergency and arguing that a long-standing trade imbalance had harmed U.S. manufacturing and posed a threat to national security.